Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual panel organized in the framework of RoMed Mediterranean Dialogues, the year-long initiative co-promoted by ISPI and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Well, today we turn the spotlight on the impact of the war in Gaza on the relations between Israel and Turkey. The question that we will address today is it a breaking point for bilateral reconciliation? We will address this question with the help of our distinguished speakers that I'm very glad to introduce. Today with us, Dr. Ali Bakir, Assistant Professor at Qatar University and Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Gallia Lindenstrauss, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. Welcome, Gallia. And Dr. Taha Özhan, Research Director at the Ankara Institute. Welcome, Taha.
Thank you, Valeria. Really being appreciated here.
So the Israel-Hamas war seems to have questioned the normalization process between Turkey and Israel, a normalization process carried out in 2022 that resulted in the restoration of diplomatic relations after years of tensions. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was supposed to visit Ankara last July, but at the end, the visit was cancelled for health reasons. In September, President Erdogan met Netanyahu on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York and invited him to visit Turkey. However, the conflict in Gaza that erupted after Hamas' brutal attack on Israeli civilians on October 7 has been a game changer for bilateral relations. Initially, President Erdogan offered his mediation and tried to play a balancing act between Israel and Hamas, leveraging on good relations with both sides. However, this balancing act didn't last long. And as we know, President Erdogan has been very vocal vis-à-vis Israel and Netanyahu. So the first question to Ali is, what are the main reasons, the main factors behind Erdogan's decision to abandon his initial balancing act and to support Hamas? Please, Ali, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Valeria. It's always great to be with you. I very much appreciate the invitation. Allow me also to highlight that I will be speaking on my personal capacity. Answering your question, there is no doubt that the Turkish government banked on the Balancing Act policy at the beginning of the crisis, hoping that this would enable it to play sort of mediatory role between the involved parties, maybe similar to the one that Ankara currently is playing between Russia and Ukraine in the ongoing war. However, I believe that there are several reasons or factors that forced the Turkish government to reassess its position and adopt a different course on the current Israeli war against the Palestinians in Gaza. Chief among them, I believe, Netanyahu's personal decision to expand the scale and the scope of war to include land invasion of Gaza, as well as also his decision to escalate the deliberate, intentional, and systematic targeting of Palestinian civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza, including schools, universities, churches, mosques, hospitals, UN facilities, etc. I think that this kind of escalation deprived the Turkish government from the maneuvering space and forced it to adopt a different position and to act accordingly, to come up with a strong response to this escalation. This is maybe reason number one. And number two, I believe that the effort of several Western countries, especially the US administration, to sideline Turkey from the current developments and maybe try to prevent it from playing an active role in the crisis, fearing that this would highlight Ankara's leadership role and regional role as a regional power. So I think that we all saw that US officials excluded Ankara from their tours at the beginning of the crisis, especially during October. And as a result, Ankara tried to say, we are here, you cannot ignore us, and we will be part of any certain development or maybe later solution to this crisis. So this also forced the Turkish government to raise its voice. And third, I believe that the growing public rage in Turkey against the Israeli aggression against the Palestinians, especially targeting the civilians, which resulted in, up until now, more than 15,500 confirmed deaths. More than 70% of them are children and women. This, of course, put the Turkish government in a critical situation, and maybe this is one of the few moments during which the public is one step ahead of the government and is pressuring it to take some actions concerning the Israeli escalation against the Palestinian civilians. And of course, the Turkish government cannot just ignore this fact internally. And additionally, it has its own calculations when it comes to internal politics. As we all know, also there is a coming local election in March 2024, and taking into consideration the internal factors is important when it comes to the calculations of the Turkish government. I believe there are several also other important factors, but these are mainly the most important three factors that highlighted or forced the Turkish government to reassess its position and adopt a different course.
Thank you very much, Ali, for highlighting these important factors. And now with Gallia, let's try to assess the impact of the Israel-Hamas war on bilateral relations. From an Israel perspective, may we talk about a breaking point, Gallia?
So first, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. I think it should be first emphasized that Israel approached the 2022 normalization with Turkey with skepticism. And it was worried exactly from the scenario that is now unfolding, that in case of a sharp deterioration in the situation between Israel and the Palestinians, Turkey would react harshly and the normalization will come to an end. This time around, Israel did something it didn't do previously, which was that it was the first to call back its ambassador for consultation. And only then Turkey did the same. Usually Israel, looking historically at the Israel-Turkish relations, Israel was usually what we would call the courting side and did not initiate any deterioration in relations with Turkey. So this time it's different. Still, technically speaking, recalling ambassadors back for consultations is a moderate diplomatic step and is easily reversible. There were three factors that were supposed to cushion the Turkish response to what's happening now between Israel and the Palestinians. And I think it did cushion the effect in the first 2 weeks, and then maybe it will also allow us to avoid a breaking point in relations. The first factor is the strengths of Israel-Azerbaijani relations and the fact that Baku attributed parts of its success in 2020 and 2023 in reclaiming its lands to Israel assistance. This was obviously also viewed favorably in Ankara and supposedly paved the way for Israeli-Azerbaijani-Turkish cooperation. The second factor is the Abraham Accords, and more specifically, the accords signed between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, which Turkey first objected, but later on was de facto supported. And the Abraham Accords were also seen as reducing Turkey's monopoly as a Muslim-majority state having strong civilian ties with Israel. And this actually gave Israel more leverage in its relations with Turkey. And lastly, the Israeli response to the February 2023 devastating two earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. Israel was quick to send to Turkey the second largest foreign assistance mission, which was again well received in Ankara and had an effect also afterwards. So these were the three things that were supposed to make the Turkish reaction less harsh than it was. But of course, Turkey reacted, as mentioned, quite harshly to Israel. To sum up my answer, Israel well knows that there is much genuine sympathy to the Palestinian cause in Turkey. There's no argument about that. And yet, from Israeli perspective, one should not equate support for the Palestinian cause with support to Hamas, which committed on October 7th atrocities that make it one of the more gruesome terror organizations in modern history. Thus, it's not so the mere fact that Israel gets criticism from Turkey on its action, which is bothersome from Jerusalem's perspective, but Turkey's rejection of seeing Hamas as a terror organization, which is the difficult part for Israel to digest. This was true before October 7th, but is even much more true today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gallia. Thanks for giving us this important perspective. I would like to turn to Taha and ask him the same question from the Turkish perspective. May we consider this war as a breaking point in bilateral relations? Taha, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Valeria. Actually, most of has been already said, but the Turkish-Israeli relations were always problematic rather than having flawless relations. So it has nothing to do with current government. It should be understood. And it will be a good if we remind ourselves ups and downs in the relations for the last 75 years. First, Turkey voted against UN partition plan, but then recognized State of Israel in 49. In 56, during the Suez Canal crisis, Turkey downgraded its representation in Israel to chargé d'affaires level. In 63, it was upgraded back to legation level. In 67, Turkey considered Israel as an aggressor state, but opposed the resolution to severe diplomatic relations with Israel. At the beginning of 1980, Turkey upgraded back diplomatic mission as the embassy level in Israel. And same year, after Israel's annexations in Jerusalem and declaration of Jerusalem as a capital, relations downgraded back to second secretary. In 1990s, relations improved due to military tutelage in Turkey and the coup in Turkey. So military was pushing to develop relations with Israel. But in 2010 was a critical year where Israel attacked Turkish aid ship and killed 10 Turkish civilian activists. Relations again cut. It took a decade to resettle relations, and now de facto diplomatic relations are frozen. It's been explained by Gallia that Israel was the first to somehow call back their ambassador in Ankara. This wasn't expected. But the latest crisis, I should say, it's a huge blow up to the relations. During the first days of the crisis, Turkey wanted to preserve balanced approach that Ali explained towards the crisis in hope of using its leverages. Because Ankara had a couple of leverages during the last crisis, because Ankara just restored its diplomatic relations with Israel. Israeli PM was about to visit Turkey, and they contacted in New York with Erdogan. Ankara thought its relations with Israel and good communication with Hamas would help during the crisis. But after Israel turned retaliation into a revenge campaign, later into massacres, the leverage faded away. Although this is the latest shape of the relations, Ankara did not cut diplomatic relations. This is important, although still on the paper, but both Turkey and Israel somehow preserving their relations, diplomatic relations. After Gaza, I don't think there is much room left for productive relations, especially Netanyahu in power will severely constrain Turkey to approach Israel again. In short term, only two developments could change the nature of the relations. First, a new government in Israel and with a new approach, definitely. Second, a new constructive political framework for Palestinians could emerge, and it would alter Ankara's relations with Israel. Other than these two developments, in a foreseeable future, Turkish-Israeli relations more or less will remain idle.
Thank you very much, Taha. And I'd like to turn again to Ali to ask him a question about a possible mediation role for Turkey, for Erdogan in the Gaza war, a mediation role for a ceasefire in the future. Do you see any chance for a Turkish mediation, Ali, or are there no conditions for Turkey to play such a role?
Well, it depends, but given the current situation, it is highly unlikely that Turkey would be able to play any kind of mediatory role. Again, there are several factors that are related to the other parties, including the Israelis. I would say I would focus on maybe three factors. First, what I call the Netanyahu factor. During his 15 years or so in the power, Netanyahu has been a poisonous factor in the Israeli-Turkish relations. He's widely believed to be responsible also for the current escalation in Palestine, the current escalation in the region. We should not forget that the so-called Abraham Accords were an Israeli tool to jump over the Palestinian issue at the expense of the Palestinians. Many observers and experts warned that this would backfire and cause problems, but these warnings didn't find hearing or listening ear in Tel Aviv and in Washington and elsewhere. Now it's proved that these accords are valueless. They don't have any meaning, and this is why one reason Netanyahu has an active interest in prolonging the current war and possibly maybe at certain point expand it, because he knows that once this war stops, then probably his political life will end. So this factor, the Netanyahu factor, will pose challenges to any possible Turkish mediatory role, and I don't think that the Turks would do such role as long as Netanyahu is in power. Maybe if he leaves, and he should be leaving after this war, then this opens the stage to a different chapter. Then Turkey can reassess its position and play different kind of roles. Number two, I would say the role, the war enablers. The decision to escalate the current aggression against the Palestinians is not totally 100% Israeli internal decision. Israel couldn't have done this without full support from certain Western countries, chief among them the US, also Germany, UK, and to some extent Canada and Australia. So as long as these countries provide shelter and immunity for the Israeli aggression against the Palestinians, and as long as they are not willing to de-escalate the situation, it would be very challenging and hard for Turkey to challenge them or try to play a role, given that the balance of power also is not on Turkey's side. So it will be very hard for Turkey to play a role in this sense. The third factor, in my opinion, is the lack of serious, I would call, leverage on Israel and Hamas at the same time. Turkey doesn't have serious leverage over Israel, neither on Hamas. Its ties with the Israelis are new. I mean, when we speak about the normalization process, and also when it comes to Hamas, it's not that strong as some may assume compared to other regional players. So I think that because of this, part of the Turkish position to support Hamas and to be vocal about Hamas being resistant and not terrorist organization, as some try to promote lately, taking this away from the general context of more than 80 years of Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. That's why the Turkish policy is to, by supporting Hamas, is to try to build its leverage through adopting a stance close to Hamas. But at the same time, we can also notice that, as my colleague rightly maybe noticed, Turkey didn't adopt a maximum anti-Israel stance, and there is still the relations are going in terms of economic relations and other kind of relations, which means that this is also a way of trying to keep the connections and maybe build a leverage against Israel later, in a hope to use it to play a mediator role or reconciliatory role, or maybe a role in the coming period after the war settles down.
Thank you, Ali. So we know that economy is an important dimension in Israeli-Turkey relations. They have economic relations where have always been good, even in a period of tensions, even when political and diplomatic relations were frozen. So I would like to ask Gallia, what are the prospects for economic and even for energy relations between Turkey and Israel? What are the main interests at stake? Gallia, please.
So Turkey is a major trading partner of Israel, among the top 5 countries Israel imports from. And Israel is also a non-trivial trade partner for Turkey. It's among the top 15 countries Turkey exports to, and sometimes it's even among the top 10. Turkey-Israel trade levels have reached unprecedented level in 2022. We're talking about $8 billion mutual trade, of which 3/4 are Turkish exports to Israel and 1/4 Israeli exports to Turkey. It should be emphasized that also prior to the October 7th war, trade between Turkey and Israel started to shrink. This most likely is related to the post-COVID-19 shipping dynamics, and also the economic impact of the controversial judicial reform in Israel, which manifested itself in less economic activity. From what I see in Israeli statistics, there was actually some positive bounce back in the level of imports from Turkey in October, likely due to the fact that the Israeli public was purchasing large quantities of emergency supplies, many of which are made in Turkey. There is a public sentiment now in Israel of boycotting Turkish products, which is likely to have some effects. But in the long run, I don't see any real alternative for Israel importing large quantities from Turkey. The average Turkish consumer cannot boycott Israel products, because what Turkey imports from Israel is basically things related to the petrochemical industry and fertilizers. Thus, what we saw in the Turkish publics were some manifestations of resentments towards American and global corporations in Turkey, but you cannot really boycott Israel in Turkey. As for energy, Turkey remains an important hub for Israel's oil imports, which come from Central Asia and the Caucasus. Azerbaijan is one of the main suppliers of Israel, and this is one of the reasons Turkey has not touched this aspect in the past. And I think it will hesitate to touch this aspect also currently, because it will also taint its image as a reliable transit state. Before the October 7th war, there were expectations for greater Israeli-Turkish cooperations in the energy realm. I have to say I was skeptical whether these were serious plans or whether they were just meant to sabotage cooperation between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Obviously, the risk dimension of energy cooperation with Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean has risen substantially, making it harder to cooperate in the day after the war. However, again, it's interesting to note that one of the bidding companies that won a recent tender for the search of gas off Israeli shores is the Azerbaijani company Sukal. So again, this adds this dimension of Israel-Azerbaijani-Turkish triangle. And again, I think this has some moderating effect on Turkish policies vis-a-vis Israel.
Thank you, Gallia. You said that Turkey cannot adopt a real boycott of Israeli products. We have seen in the past weeks that people in Turkey boycotted some products, and we know that there is a great support for the the Palestinian cause in Turkey. And I would like to ask Taha, how and to what extent public opinions, perceptions, and attitude affect Turkey's relations with Israel?
I mean, needless to say, public opinion in Turkey is sensitive to the Palestinian issue. Turkish citizens express solidarity with Palestinian cause, and their views impact government policies. That's for sure. In Arab world, there is a public opinion quite anti-Israel, but the Turkish context is little different because it goes back with the Ottoman background, their past, the historical imagination. Everything plays a role within it. So it is coming out of that historical memory and turns into a current affair. And that reaction is there for years. I mean, needless to remind that Palestinian issue is a common ground for all political parties and entire Turkish public. With the exception, the main opposition party leader called Hamas as a terrorist organization once and retracted that position because there was a huge opposition within that political party. So it recorded as a political gaffe. And in any public survey, which in our institution we do every month, Israel preserves the place of most unfavorable position for years. I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. But especially after Gaza flotilla massacre, Turkish public opinion towards Israel was severely turned into a negative. And since then, it's pretty same, I should say. And with current Israel war against Gaza, it got even worse. Historically, Turkish Islamism, nationalism, and leftism, which covers overwhelming majority of Turkish society, have a negative approach towards Israel. And same thing true for the all age groups, I should say, because if you follow up many polls in different countries in the world, for example, in US and Europe, there are differences between age groups, but in Turkey, it's distributed very well throughout all age groups. And it should be noted that Israel never helped to correct this image in Turkey. It will be unrealistic to expect any Turkish political position domestically and internationally moving against the Turkish public opinion at this stage. Although this is the case, as just reminded before me, the trade relations not affected from the political tensions. Anti-Israeli position within the public and the feeling remain untouched through the course of the decades, but the trade also untouched. And current government is under intense public pressure to reevaluate Ankara's trade and economic relations with Israel. I am more or less agree. This most probably will be preserved as it is. But a latest development, if you follow the last 2 days actually, the head of Israel's Shin Bet domestic security service, Ronen Bar, said Hamas members living in Qatar, Lebanon, and Turkey would be targeted. Diplomatically, it's a scandalous thing. It's being a big surprise, easily being said such a thing. And Turkey has warned Israel that targeting Hamas members within its borders will result serious consequences. This is normally not a very Turkish style, especially if I'm not wrong, we never heard such a statement from Turkish intelligence on any issue. And if you check out the news, all kinds of news outlets, I mean, having a source within the intelligence. So it's quite clear that intelligence wanted to be heard. But this is first time happening in the Turkish intelligence history, responding back such a threat. And you should not forget also, there is a historical memory and a near-term history, which is Cemal Kaşıkçı is still a trauma in Turkish mind. And if such a thing happens here, it will more deteriorate relations, and the public opinion will even get worse. I don't know if there is any room to be more worse. So this was a rare and unique incident, which is also threatening current level of the relations.
Thanks a lot, Taha, also for underlying this important aspect. We have time for a third round of questions. And I would like to ask Ali, in a post-war scenario, how is Ankara, which is Ankara position on the future of Gaza? Please, Ali, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valeria. I think that the Palestinian issue in general is very important to Turkey and to Turkish decision makers, and many observers think that this is just a unique period, and Ankara is interested in Palestine during the last 10 or 20 years, but this is not accurate at all. And I would like just to add to what my colleague said, Taha. In 73, Turkey objected using its military bases by the US to channel weapons to Israel in its aggression against its neighbors, and also allowed the Soviet Union to bypass its airspace and carry weapons to those in conflict with Israel. So, and obviously there is an importance for the Palestinian issue in Turkey. So I think that the government will try as much as possible to be involved in the issue, although we should admit that Turkey also has limitations on what it can do at certain moments, at certain times and dynamics. But this is what the government will do. I think that they are aiming to play a role in the reconstruction. This is no doubt about it. They are also aiming to play maybe a kind of security role, maybe peace troops. And we know that Ankara is actively contributing to the peace troops in several countries in the region and beyond, including Lebanon on the borders with Israel. And this has been renewed since, I think, 2006 or 7, if I'm not wrong. I don't recall the year. So maybe there is a plan to contribute in such thing. Also, there have been some talk about a Turkish proposal to maybe play an advanced security role in terms of being a guarantor of the post-war situation in Gaza and with Israel, meaning that it would prefer to be one of several players to guarantee the situation. I don't see how this will be going or how effective it would be. Several Arab states actually declined this option for their own reasons. Also, they think that such role would jeopardize their internal legitimacy, because at the end of the day, if Israel decided for a certain reason to escalate, and the US as guarantor on the Israeli side didn't pressure Israel, then these governments cannot do anything actually in reality against Israel or the US. So this would put them in a very critical situation. I don't know about the Turkish situation, but I believe it would be similar, because we should not forget that Turkey is a guarantor when it comes to Cyprus, but we don't see this role is, reflected in a much larger plans or agenda in this issue or beyond. So I think that maybe on the economic level, yes, the government is aiming for a role. On the security level, it is aiming, but to what extent it can achieve it is another question. On the political level, it depends on who will be in Israel, who will be leading the government, and also what is the plan for Gaza after this war. Because as far as we see, no one actually has a plan to this situation, or how the situation should be after the war. So it's still very cloudy situation.
Yeah, this is a very, very important question. And now I would like to turn again to Gallia and to ask her if, from your perspective, a change in Israeli leadership will improve in the future bilateral relations. Ali, in his previous intervention, said that the Netanyahu factor has been one of the main obstacles in good relations between the two countries. What do you think about?
So yes, my esteemed colleagues emphasized the role of Netanyahu in the deterioration of relations, but I'm not so sure this is true. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, just before the October 7th war, we saw a high point in Turkish-Israeli relations when Erdogan and Netanyahu met for the first time face-to-face on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. So I really want to emphasize to the audience actually the traumatic impact of the October 7th events on the Israeli public. And there has been a major change in the national psyche of the country. Many Israelis lost their basic sense of security. We have de facto 2 buffer zones in the south of Israel and in the north of Israel, in which that made many people have to evacuate their homes. Thousands of people have evacuated their homes. And Israelis are united in their wish to see the end of Hamas rule in Gaza and the end of Hamas as a military entity. For this, they are willing to pay a very high price in every realm of our existence. It is clear to most Israelis that if Israel will not respond in a decisive matter, it will have no future. And when I mean a decisive matter, I do not mean targeting civilians. On the contrary, I think Hamas rule in Gaza is also bad for Palestinians, because they're using Palestinian civilians to shield their activity. They're using militants are using the Palestinian civilians to hide. They hide under civilian infrastructure. They build the tunnels under hospitals and mosques and schools. As mentioned before, they shouldn't be a target, but they shouldn't be used by Hamas. I'm not sure sometimes the outside world understand this enough, this unity in the Israeli public. I'm not at times sure Ankara understands this enough. But anyhow, there might be a change in leadership in Israel, and this might be used as an excuse to improve relations with Israel. But basically, the Israeli public is united in their belief in the current course of action. I think important change in relations can happen if Ankara will be more receptive to Israelis' claim that whatever solution you think that is desirable to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas' way of terror, atrocities, and shielding militants behind civilians is completely wrong. And we should also remember terror groups are copycats. They copy from each other. And Turkey, that has suffered from terror and is still fighting terror, should be very much responsive to Israelis' claims that no matter what, you shouldn't allow terrorists to operate the way Hamas did on October 7th. And I think if there will be open ear in Ankara to these Israeli claims, then we hopefully will see an improvement in relations.
Thank you, Gallia. Very clear of what you said. And now we are getting to the conclusion of our event. But before, I'd like to ask the last question to Taha, remaining on scenarios. We would like to broaden our look. And Taha, in your opinion, what will be the implications of the Israel-Hamas war on Turkey's posture and foreign policy in the Middle East?
Yeah, but first of all, I mean, if Israel wants to communicate in an effective and fruitful level with Ankara, the worst scenario for Tel Aviv will be having any comparison between Israeli occupation in Palestine and the terrorism issue in Turkey. Historically, its context, everything is quite different. But more than that, the ears are definitely close to hear such a comparison. And I would not advise such a comparison to start communication with Ankara. It won't work. But the nexus between Israel and Turkey's regional dynamics presents right now both an opening and, if not a threat, a hurdle. The prospect materializes from Turkey's pre-existent repair of relations with all regional nations, mainly Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Because imagine if those relations are not repaired and this crisis happened, what kind of policy and imposition will be in Turkey? And now it's quite explaining itself. In the aftermath of recent crisis, an opportunity surfaces to pivot towards a new chapter in these repaired relations. Conversely, a challenge looms due to disparities between Turkey's perspective on Israel and the viewpoints of other regional counterparts concerning the Israeli-Palestinian predicament. So the regional actors, other than Turkey, having different approach than the Turkey. So that's a kind of challenge Ankara needs to handle. Nonetheless, one could posit that past 8 weeks have drawn Ankara and the regional nations into a closer orbit. So they are in more closer orbit right now. The establishment of a collaborative platform by foreign ministers of 7 nations, coupled with their imminent approach in Qatar this week, carries a weight. It's going to happen, I think, 2 days from now, or day after, I don't know. And in addition, the Turkish offer, which is just mentioned, of being a guarantor for Palestine is a solid one, and it should be studied, because if you check out Turkish security approaches in that sense, multilaterally from Afghanistan to Lebanon and Balkans, Turkey was present with their soldiers.
Problem
in different
with our connection. Yeah. Apologize, we have some problem with Taha connection. We will try to restore it, but we are at the end of our med panel. So Taha, okay, I can see you again.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I do hear you. I do hear
yes,
you.
Please, we lost the last sentences you said. So please.
Okay, I'll repeat it. I was just talking about the guarantor system offered by Turkey. This is a solid one, and Turkey has experience on that. Multilaterally, Turkey played such a role from Afghanistan to Lebanon and Balkans. Bilaterally, from Somalia to Libya, Turkey played such a role, and it changed actually the things on the ground. So I think there should be a chance, if it is given, Turkey could play again a constructive role in this security arrangement. And even if the consensus remains minimal, which those 7 nations are coming together in the Gulf and Turkey, the emergence of a united political vision regarding Israel is notably unprecedented. Never happened before. Turkey was diverting from those approaches, but right now they are trying to find at least a minimum level of understanding. And it is, Valeria, imperative to dispel a considerable misperception surrounding the enhancement of Turkish-Israeli relations. These relations never achieved normalization. Rather, diplomatic channels have been tentatively opened, restored, and there's a difference between having a diplomatic relations and normalization with a country. Normalization of Israel's regional relations hinges on a singular condition: the cessation of occupation and the attainment of an acceptable political representation for Palestinians. This condition represents actually the elephant in the room for all normalization attempts. Ignoring the elephant is implausible. Denial is an exercise for futility, I should say. As long as occupation endures, the inevitability of the violence and the resistance persists. Hence, all countries in the region, commencing so-called normalization with Israel, must engage at some level rationalization before normalization. And my last words, this rationalization means recalibrating their geopolitical approach, facing with the realities on the ground, and having a long-term attainable vision rather than irrational ambitions such as eliminating Palestinian resistance or continuing occupation. Otherwise, current status quo will continue more or less. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taha. So we get to the end of this panel, and I would like to thank all of you for helping us to understand better the complexity of relations between Turkey and Israel. So thanks again to Ali, Bakir, Gallia, Lindenstrauss, and Taha, Özhan for being with us today. And thanks to all of you for following this MED panel. Goodbye and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. See you soon, inshallah.
Thank you.